Hi everybody, Timothy Ferris here with a few words about money. Money has a bad reputation in our culture and in most of the other cultures of the world. You hear about money as dirty. The phrase filthy lucre used to be thrown around a lot. Lucre means a profit, and the idea that there's something wrong with making a profit is deeply rooted in European and American culture. And yet at the same time, most people like having some money, and most would like to have some more. Most people working at jobs in the United States, if offered a promotion with more money, will take it, or if they have a chance to get a better job at a significantly higher salary someplace else, will take it. Americans are widely invested in the stock market because they find that that's a good way to increase the value of such money as they've already been able to make. So why the contradiction? Why does our culture condemn money and profit at the same time that most people seem to like having some money and wouldn't mind having some more? For the answer to that, we need to look back in Western culture to the time prior to the Enlightenment, prior to the rise of technology, science, and liberal thinking. That was a world in which, first of all, religions were not the tame versions that we see in the liberal democracies today. Religions had real power. And as spiritual organizations, the Christian churches in particular, were committed to an unchanging view of the world in which the poor stayed poor and their reward was to come in an afterlife. The Roman Catholic Church, for instance, regarded loaning money as a sin against God. That's why loaning money for a profit, a practice that the church called usury, became so much the provenance of the small number of Europeans who were Jewish. They were outside the church and therefore had no need to obey its strictures against loaning money. This became embarrassing for the Roman Catholic Church on those occasions when they needed money badly enough that they had to borrow it at interest from primarily Jewish loaners, while at the same time proclaiming that this very practice was against the will of God. Further, there was no science of economics hundreds of years ago, so fallacies went unchallenged. For instance, it was widely believed that the world was economically a zero-sum game. Most of the kings and queens of Europe thought that the only way to really increase the wealth of their country was to conquer some other country, bring its spoils back. And that's a zero-sum deal. You've got more money, somebody else has less. And that's the way Europeans thought of economics before there was a science of economics. There was no technology to generate scientific knowledge, and with it greater opportunities for wealth. And of course, belief in a zero-sum universe meant that nobody knew how to take advantage of such opportunities should they ever come up. So the rate of economic growth in Europe for 1,000 years was approximately zero. In the absence of money and the absence of economic growth, it was easy to thunder at a congregation against the making of money, the loaning of money, because the prospect of making any real money was so remote that you were talking completely in theoretical terms. It's a little as if I were to go to my teenage son with, let's say, a copy of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, and to hold it up and say, now, son, I know you're starting to date girls, and that's all perfectly normal, but I want you to promise me that you'll never date this supermodel here. Let's see, she's from Czechoslovakia, because I just think she'd break your heart. Well, that's a pretty easy promise for a teenager to make, because what are the odds that he's ever going to meet this or any other Czechoslovakian supermodel? That's the way people prior to the Enlightenment regarded the idea of making a lot of money. They'd never seen it happen, it had never happened to anybody they'd heard of, and it sure as hell didn't look like it was going to happen to them. So yeah, we go along. Money is evil. Making a profit is evil because somebody else has to lose out on it, or so we think. Money is bad. Now today we live in an entirely different world with regard to money. Back around the year 1700 or so, as science and technology were starting to get going, there were optimists in London who were science and technology enthusiasts. Some of them used to meet at coffee houses in the delightfully called Change Alley, which originally meant changing money, and had become a center for coffeehouse discussions about what the future might look like as the science and technological process, and they tried to guess at what the promise would be for an advanced world of the future. This proved very difficult to do. It's hard to envision something that had not been part of the culture. How could everybody get wealthier in a zero-sum world? But the world, fortunately, is not zero-sum, and as it turned out, they could. The wealth of the world today was literally unimaginable in the past. The most optimistic of those intelligent, highly informed thinkers gathering in the coffee shops in Change Alley in London and in their equivalent in Paris and Hamburg and Milan and so forth. Nobody guessed that we would get to anywhere like where the world is today. The median personal income for the entire human species, the number at which half are above and half are below, is $18,000 a year. And of those below, that notorious bottom quintile of the poor living on only $1 a day has almost emptied out. Those folks are doubled or tripled their income, and the $2 a day crowd is dropping too as the world becomes more middle class. The world continues to generate fresh wealth to the tune of about $15 trillion a year. And I know that you read that a few Silicon Valley billionaires control half the world's wealth, but that's calculated by taking their stock in their companies as a share of the total stock currently being traded in all companies, which is much less than the total wealth of the world. If the wealthiest individual in the world has, let's say, $100 billion, that comes out to less than 1/10 of 1% of the world's actual wealth. So what changed to move us from more than 1,000 years of poverty, and really thousands of years of abject poverty before that, and even fairly recently? 90% of Americans in 1960 fell below what is the poverty line in constant dollars in America today. So what happened to bring about all of this change? As I've been mentioning, one was the rise of technology and science. That machines reached the point that scientific experiments could be conducted and get meaningful answers, with which new improvements to technology could occur, and you had what the economists call a virtuous circle. Economics itself was another advantage. There was no science of economics until around the 18th century or so, and it's still developing, it's still being ridiculed, as many new things are. But economics allows you to turn the headlights on and have some idea, imperfect as it may be, of where things are going to go. Experimentation is fundamental to science. I hope to do a lecture in this series on experimentation. And markets are places of constant experimentation. In global markets today, transactions take place at a rate of about 4,000 per second, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those are mostly experiments. I buy something because I think it's worth more to me than the money I'm paying for it. I invest in something because I think this investment might work out. All of those experiments, that's the basis of economics, really. So although it can't run formal experiments as readily as the physical sciences, marketplace experiments are going on every moment of every day. And finally, I would add the growth of money itself. The invention of money was a great thing for women and minorities, among others, and those benefits have persisted down even into the liberal era. I'm old enough to remember when in many states of the United States, a woman could not take out a mortgage on a home, even if she owned it outright, without her husband or some other responsible man signing the documents, someone the bank could trust. Our literature is full of stories of people going into big marble bank buildings with a good idea, want to open a pizzeria, and being turned down because they didn't look or talk like the guy behind the desk at the bank, and it was nearly always a man. That's changed thanks to liberal governance, and the world has come to realize that you make more money by dealing with people fairly and equally, simply on the basis of whether their character is good and their prospects are good, not whether they belong to your religion or your ethnic group, or whether they're the same gender as you are. I'd like to conclude this disquisition about money with a story about my neighbor of a couple of decades ago. He had a good job, but he also had an idea. We used to talk about his idea, and I would say, sounds good to me. His boss said the same thing, but he always had new projects for him. He'd been with the company some time, and my memory serves, it went on for a year or two that my friend worked on his idea while still having his job. One day I saw him and he said, I did it. I quit my job, started my startup, and he showed me. It was just him and 2 other people and 3 computers, not much money. His idea is known today as cloud computing. His company employs over 50,000 people. And in part because he built philanthropy into the company from the beginning, he's become one of the major philanthropists out here in California. And we have them throughout the country. Americans give away almost $500 billion a year. My friend is a member of a minority. Prior to the rise of science and liberalism and economic science, nobody who had any real money would have given his idea any attention. That's why virtually no money-making ideas got anywhere until about the 17th, 18th century, and why the dynamics of these ideas in practice have produced a healthier, wealthier, and by the way, happier and more peaceful world than we've ever seen before. So anyhow, I hope I have persuaded you to at least consider that the positives of living in a free, rich society make it better for just about everybody than to have lived in the unfree, poor societies that dominated the world for nearly all of human history. Thanks for listening. See you next time.